Pastor Thomas Dixon, and now John Singletary will challenge current North Charleston Mayor Keith Summey in 2019. In this special edition of Quintin's Close-Ups, I speak exclusively with John Singletary one-on-one. And be sure to download the free Quintin's Close-Ups app in your Apple or Google Play stores. Mr. Singletary, it is so good to see you.
Good seeing you again, Quintin.
Yes, sir. The last time I saw you was at Jim Finch's 90th birthday bash last year. Catch me up and tell me what's going on with you.
Well, we took 15 and part of 16 after the race to strategize for the 19 race to build a complete strategy that will allow us to have strategic, tactical, and operational levels within our campaign to ensure victory in 2019, to put people in place who are going to be project leads, and to get out and really find out what the community is needing. We plan on being successful in 19, and so since then, that's what I've been doing.
What is Mayor Keith Summey doing in 2017, not doing in 2017, that you want to do in 2019?
Well, there's lots of things. First thing we take a look at is economic parity. When it comes to the community in North Charleston, right now, particularly the African American community, they are suffering to the tune of $320 million every single year in total impact, simply because he will not be fair to that community. Our local whites are not getting what they should out of this booming economy. Why? Because there is the buddy system, and the buddy system right now, it's using people outside of the city, outside of the state. We take a look at, for instance, the flood that just came.
Right.
Irma came,
right.
Evanston Estates flooded. Lady on the corner lives 20 feet from three city drains. All three were clogged up, and as a result, she gets 4 or 5 feet of water inside of her house. When we take a look at Cameron Terrace has a moat built around it, so we've spent hundreds of thousands of taxpayer dollars in order to protect his neighborhood, but didn't show compassion for areas like Pepper Hill, where people have to order berms in order to protect their homes, for Evanston Estates, for Northwood Estates, many of the others that the infrastructure has simply been neglected. When we take a look at the major projects that he's done, most of them have actually failed. Some would say different, but my take on it is this. Growing the city, for instance. We've grown as a result of the gentrification in the city of Charleston. Close to 50,000 people gentrified. They're #1 in the nation. That's what caused the influx of people in North Charleston, so that's why we've grown in terms of population. We look at Noisette, a project that ended up in court, cost a lot of taxpayers money, with someone outside of the city and the state, failed. When we take a look at Westcott, when it initially was done, they had to have Aaron Brockovich come down here to deal with failures. When we take a look at the millions of dollars that they put into the golf course there, without putting anything in the other communities, failed. When we take a look at the Navy hospital deal,
right.
Failure. When it ended up in a lawsuit, now the county is looking at doing $33 million as a payoff when his son has an economic interest. That is on the record, but failed and refused to put it on, attach it to the minutes, which is what the law says. When we take a look at the Commerce Parkway,
right.
Ingleside, they did a flip-flop. Normally the developer actually pays for the infrastructure and everything, and then from there they dedicate it to the city. Again, a company outside of the local area, Weiser, a German company where his son is the executive vice president. Millions of dollars spent with outside people, just like there's the Navy-based hospital. Chicora Gardens is outside people. And so our local whites, their only opportunity to get a fair chance at being able to get a piece of the pie is to combine with African Americans who are not getting a piece of the pie, in order that some fundamental fairness come into the system. The buddy system is not sanctioned by the General Assembly. It does not work, and as it names depicts, It's for buddies of his.
This particular article has been talked about by a lot of people, and you know about this. This is the Post Inquiry article about Mayor Summey that came out a couple of Sundays ago. And let me read a portion of it. It says this: blur the line between public duty and personal interests, granting favors and bargaining lucrative deals with friends, family members, and strategic allies. Consolidate power by securing positions in city government for personal friends and fellow elected officials. Engage in a private land deal and accepted more than $10,000 in campaign contributions from a prominent contractor with the city government. Routinely allowed campaign donors to exceed the 1,000 limit for local elections using a loophole in state law. Declined to recuse himself from voting on matters that stood to help his son's employees. When you put down that article, John, what was running through your mind?
Well, the article came out immediately. I got a barrage of calls, people asking me, well, did you sit down with someone and write an article on something? And I said, no. What are you talking about?
Okay.
Eventually, because the digital version comes out first, eventually I took a look at the article, and you interviewed me last year,
Right.
and many of the things that are in that article we talked about, and a part of the article actually is pulled from your interview. But when it comes to the article, no one can take credit for all of the derogatory things that are in the article except Keith Summey, because he performed the acts. But when it comes to the revelation of it, everything in that article we revealed in 2015. He never rebutted any of it because we had factual documentation. Now, I did not sit down with Bowers and Renge in order to do that article. I had no idea it was coming out.
Right.
But after reading the article, I can squarely say that the article is closer to being correct than not correct. And here's why I say that. There's no gray area. There's no gray area at all when it comes to the pay-to-play violation in South Carolina. And in fact, there's a federal statute that says that you can't even bid, if you get a no contract bid or a bid, that you can't even donate to the campaign. Federal funds are tied up in this. Okay, so there's some federal funds tied up in this, so that should apply. But South Carolina law is very clear. When it comes to pay, there's two sections.
Okay.
The first section, there's two sentences. The first sentence in the first section says very clearly, the only, and it doesn't even address the elected official, it only addresses the contractor. And it says that the only thing required to be in violation of the law is that you receive a non-bid contract and that you pay into the campaign. Now it ends there for the contractor. If those two things are done, no gray area, it's black and white. They are in violation. The second part deals with the elected official. And that part deals with the fact that if he solicits any money, then he too is in violation. In order to do that, you have to interview or investigate the contractor. When I submitted the ethics complaint, what they ended up doing was stopping in the middle of the complaint, allowing him to hire an attorney, and then to negotiate for a year, give money back, and then say, out of the abundance of caution, and he did nothing wrong. Well, that's a informal PTI program. When you say abundance of caution, you exercise caution before you do something, okay? You're cautious, that's what it means, that you analyze before you commit an act. If you do it on the back end after you're caught, it is considered restitution. It's not caution. And many people would love to go in and rob a bank and take the money and say afterwards that, hey, listen, you caught me, let me give it back out of the abundance of caution and let me go free. When the Post and Courier did that article, they basically took everything that we talked about during the campaign, checked it out, only to find that the things were true, that they were true. And so I'm glad that a paper, one of the South's, I guess, largest or monsters or giants in terms of media, has done the background check, and they too say that, hey, what he did was wrong. A buddy system cannot serve the people in the community. It is fundamentally unfair. For instance, we've got a gentleman, William Taylor, a buddy of the mayor, who initially, when he received the position as the second person in charge of code enforcement, didn't even have a GED. But yet, people underneath him had college degrees, African Americans. But yet, because William Taylor is his buddy, the buddy system allowed him to be promoted. So it's a system not based on merit. And if this city is to move forward, then merit should be what we're looking at. Economic parity. Not a buddy system that is used to put people in place, oftentimes that are incompetent, even if they're willing to do what's in the best interest of the public.
We can't raise your children. North Charleston Mayor Keith Summey said that, quote, "We can't raise your children." Obviously, that was in response to the uptick in crimes in North Charleston earlier this year. He says that they can't raise their children. Let me ask you this. What can the children be aware of?
Mm-hmm. Can't raise your children. Well, as you know, North Charleston is 50% African American,
Sure.
38% Caucasian, 12% other, Asian, Hispanic, American Indian. And we normally believe that it takes a village to raise a child. It takes a village to raise a child. So the very comment itself is rubbing the public wrong because it's against their belief. When we take a look at crime in North Charleston, crime is contained inside of predominantly African American communities, and it's strategically done like that. And the reason why they contain the crime in African American neighborhoods is because crime is profitable, very profitable, for those who can access the system in such a way it allows them to put money in their pocket. Now, let me explain that a little more fully.
Okay.
When we take Union Heights, Academy, Murray Hill, Dorchester, Wayland,
Right.
and they are allowed to go to the federal government and get money like they did with the Weed and Seed program. And it's because of the high crime rate. Then they take those dollars and they transfer those dollars to areas that are predominantly white and use those like he did with Oak Terrace, like he did with the Mixon, and so on. Bonds Avenue LLC, he gave some to a church out of the Target area up on Sumner Avenue that happened to be a white church. No black churches received any money. And then he allows the crime to persist in that neighborhood. What happens is he is funneling money. He takes it from a federal agency through the auspices of addressing crime, then he slips it away to areas that's not going to impact that area. Why would he stop? Why would he stop pulling the funds down to slip them other places? He wouldn't. And the way that works is if he corrected the problem, then the funding goes away, because now I don't have the problem of high crime in North Charleston in these African American neighborhoods, and so I can't access funds. So let's contain the crime, the crime. Let's not get rid of it. We need it because it's profitable. Let's contain it in these African American neighborhoods and use the funds elsewhere. In addition to that, now when I lock the boy up, if he goes to prison, the prison system gets $60,000 a year for taking care of that child. Who gets the contracts? Who gets the contracts that's associated with the food, the clothing, and everything else at the jail? It's not African Americans who are 70% of the jail, but it happened to be his buddies who happened to be white. And so now they're making money on the contracts. Then they farm the young man out for 55 cents an hour. The jail gets 50, he gets 5 cents. They turn that money back over by making the boy pay for what it is he needs in there. So crime is extremely profitable. when you can access the system in such a way that allows your buddies to make money. Now, crime also is impacted by basically two things here in North Charleston, and that is jobs and contracts. Any situation, white, black, Hispanic, it doesn't matter, where you have prolonged, chronic joblessness in an area, you're going to have a high crime rate. When we look at the jobs, we're 50% of the population, we have about 40% of the jobs, but only 20% of the money associated with wages. And so there's a disproportionate, overwhelming disproportionate denial for the African American community when it comes to the money. We look at contracts. $67 million is what he reported. They gave in contracts, but only $2 million went to African Americans, 3% of the budget, while $65 million his buddies walked away with. When we take a look at special projects has $18 million in it. We received less than $180,000, which is 1%. And so when you have chronic no jobs, chronic no contracts, no special projects, then what it does is it drives the crime rate up. And the crime rate is high in those areas because he has failed and refused to give them their fair economic share of jobs and contracts. So that's why we have the situation, and for him to make the statement about not being able to take care of raise your children when he is causing the problem for your child is, in my opinion, consistent with when he called himself the devil during the last campaign. It's consistent when he says that he's going to inflict retribution upon them. That's exactly what that is. And as a community, we have to recognize it.
What is the mayor's relationship with the African American community and the church, in your mind?
In my mind, it is one of, oftentimes I've heard people say that people in high places, particularly with buddy systems, they have what they consider usable idiots. Now, I'm not calling the African American community, pastors, or anyone, but there are particular people who have sold this community out that I would call them a usable idiot, because they are in fact allowing a buddy system to get rid of the very thing that gives them their livelihood long term. When we look at 15, when he took city funds and used as dirty money by putting into our black churches, and we had some of our ministers to take that money, do commercials for him and everything else, then that is a situation where, in my opinion, it's a Judas syndrome. They're taking 30 pieces of silver to sell the community out. And there's no way for us to move forward as long as that happens. When we have a mayor that forgets about the African American community until it's time to vote, and then he comes around to do a fish fry in African American communities, but he gives barbecue up in Westcott, then it should tell them that you're not worthy of certain things. When we have a mayor that denies the African American community, which is 50% of the population and 53% of the voting population as of 2015, when he denies them their fair amount of jobs, their fair amount of contracts, fair amount of community resources, fair amount of special projects, then what he is in fact doing is he is using them in the worst way. All we need to do is take a look at City of Charleston. Mayor Riley was elected City of Charleston by the African American community initially, the East Side. And eventually he ran the East Side out. Gentrification is happening in North Charleston at a much faster rate than that. And it is the African American community who continually supports a buddy system and a mayor who is the face of that buddy system, the initiator of that buddy system, and the person who strategically, actively carries it out. They're supporting him when in fact he is continually getting rid of them. It's like sitting on a limb. The tree's on the left-hand side and you're cutting on the left-hand side. So eventually you're going to fall off. And that's what we're doing. Oak Terrace, for instance. Oak Terrace is a subdivision that used to be John C. Calhoun. African Americans were there. They told them they were going to go back. It is literally owned by the city of North Charleston. The contract with Sidrus says that the city owns it. Look at the contract. They sell to 97% Caucasians, which means that the city is not only supporting, initiating, but actively carrying out a gentrification process that deals with exclusionary zoning. When we take a look at 8,000 people within the city limits cannot vote due to annexation, we have to understand that overwhelmingly the majority of those people are African American. And so he is denying them the right to vote. Now he'll go back and take credit for saying that, well, we annexed places in the African American community under his watch. Well, simply because it was under his watch didn't mean that he initiated it. In fact, the Department of Justice had to come in through a lawsuit. He was made to annex those people, and the city did not tell the truth to the Department of Justice. What they actually did was, out of the battery of people that were supposed to be, they annexed a few areas and then told the Department of Justice, well, we annexed them all. And it was just a flat lie. Why? Because I just received 1,000 documents from the Department of Justice that goes over the history of annexation for North Charleston. You've got areas like the Hub, for instance, can't vote now. Stratton Capers can't vote now. There are many areas in the Wayland can't vote because of what's called donut holes that Bob King talked about in his inaugural speech that said that we need to get rid of them. Why? Because they need to hide the fact that over a long period of time, they have been instrumental in diluting the black vote. Now that's only one of many ways that they do it. For instance, during election years, they will go in, like this last election, it was Ashley Shores. But they normally get rid of a large black area because when they do that, now what happens is you don't live at that address, so you have to request a provisional ballot. Oftentimes they won't give it to you, and if you should persist and get one, then on the back end now, they have to vote as to whether they use the provisional ballot, and they've never used it. And so it displaces, outside of the illegal annexation and underbounding that's happening, they actually are getting rid of another huge chunk of African American votes right before the election. Take a look at when John C. Calhoun, when the homes were done, when Liberty Homes, when now Horizon Village, Ben Tillman, George LeGree. It's prior to an election. Why? Because it displaces another chunk of African American vote in order to dilute the black vote. Now, this election coming up, 19, is not going to have anything to do with Keith Summey and his record directly. His record is still open, and why? He's the incumbent. If you've got 20-year history and you've done so great for the people, then you should not mind someone talking about your record. After all, that is the person who they're looking to replace. And so you should be proud of your record. But now if you got things there that you don't want talked about, then no, you're not going to be proud of it. And that's why he's not proud of anyone revealing the things about his record. But this new election is going to be about whether or not African Americans can come together, unity in a community, and elect someone who not only understands what is going on, but who can actually give them their fair share. I grew up in North Charleston, from segregation through integration, and so there's a mentality that's carried over that oftentimes, unless you're from here, you don't understand.
Okay.
And when we take a look at the people who have been able to make the most strides for us, Lonnie Hamilton, for instance, a giant in the community, grew up in Acadie. So he understood from the bottom up what the community needed. Oftentimes, when we take a look at solutions to problems, whites construct and implement their own solutions, Japanese, Chinese. Jews. African Americans, we have to sit and wait for someone to construct a solution, go to the federal government, determine how they are going to get the most out of the funding that comes down, and then they push upon us what they say is the solution. We need to construct our own solution for our own problems. And the single largest thing that we can do, and this is a repeat from the first article that I put in the Chronicle in 2015, the single largest thing is that our community leaders have to come together and get behind the candidate who understands exactly what is going on and has a solution to fix that problem. That's what we have to do. So that's what this community new election is going to be about. It's going to be about the unity of the community in North Charleston, the largest community of African Americans in the state, in the richest city, with the largest amount of voting population, 53% of the vote. It's something that we can do without any help from anybody. Now, that's not to say we're anti-white, because we're not.
Okay.
It's 38%, they're 38% of the population, and whites are suffering who are local, just like blacks, but they need to get together. We're caught in what previously people depicted as a rich man's fight and a poor man's war. They kept blacks and whites apart because together they were strong enough to overcome the greed of the rich man's fight. Same with North Charleston. Local whites and blacks need to come together in order to get a part of the economic pie. Some people say, well, John, you have a problem when you talk about economic parity, in that it excludes whites. It does not. Economic parity is based on the percentage of the population. It has nothing to do with qualifications. Why? Because it is assumed and mandated that those who come to the table for contracts are certified. They are people who can do the job. Okay. If you're a contractor and you're certified by the state, you're certified, black, white, or whatever. So when we get certified contractors in and we use a system of economic parity, there should be no issue as to whether or not that person is qualified, because by the nature of their title, they're qualified. And the other thing is, people will say that when you say economic parity, you're taking from whites. I'm not taking anything from them. The problem is that the administration that we have been so small-minded that they think that the pie one has a definite amount that has to be divided. This thing is much larger than just North Charleston. When you think that there is a definition on the amount in terms of the pie, now you try and hog it all and get it all. That's what the buddy system does. It is a greedy system. But when you look much broader to see that whites, blacks, Hispanics, Asians, all of them here in North Charleston, if the city is instrumental in assisting them, can get what they want. So you don't have to necessarily take jobs from whites to give blacks their fair share. You increase the number of jobs, and everyone can get what they need. But when I say economic parity, there's another spin to it. That's in order to protect the citizens from a buddy system. Because if in fact we have a situation where blacks were to come in and do what whites fear, which is to take the jobs and contracts from them, that's no better than the buddy system. So economic parity is a measure that incorporates merit and allows whites to be protected at their 38%. So they won't be moved down to 1% of the special projects, or 3% of the contracts, or 20% of the jobs. They will be protected at 38%, just like blacks will be protected at 50%, Asians, Hispanics, and others at 12%. That gives every sector of the population more than they've ever had. It is only the buddy who is losing, and in this case, buddies who are not even from this state, and certainly not from the local area.
Well, John Singletary, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate this.
My pleasure,
Anytime.
as always.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate this.